The Narcissist in the Pulpit. And this is a true story of before I was divorced, but when I was separated and I was going to a church and I was going through a really hard time. And it was a large church, and I was talking to the church had a lot of pastors. And I was talking to one of the female pastors at the church about my problems with my estranged husband and how I believed he was a narcissist and how he had tricked me and fooled me into believing he was a Christian and how he wasn't really a Christian. And she had said to me, well, how did he fool you? And I felt very shamed by her, by that statement. Like, it really shamed me that she said that to me. Like, how could I have been fooled and tricked? Well, the ironic thing was that within about 2 or 3 months after this happening, the church, at the time I started that church, about 3 years earlier, they had a really great pastor. He was a very humble, very godly man. And he had stepped down as lead pastor. He was still worked there administratively. And then there was another pastor. And then that pastor was leaving, so they had to search for a new pastor, and this went on for months and months. And then they finally secured a new pastor. So the new pastor came to the church, and that was a big deal that there was this new pastor. Well, I started going to church and watching this pastor. And the way he was parading around and acting, I just started getting this sick feeling in my stomach. Like, wow, this guy is acting like a narcissist. And then he did this really, really horrific thing, which this other female pastor there, she was just fantastic. She led like 300 to 400 women in the women's ministry. She was just dynamic. One day he leads her up on the stage, holds her hand up, and tells everyone in the congregation that God told him that she didn't belong in the church anymore, and he basically threw her out of the church. That made me so sick to my stomach. I couldn't believe what was happening, especially being that my ex's second wife, who was very narcissistic herself, and yes, narcissists do marry narcissists, used to do this before we won full custody of their kids, which she lost all parental rights. Used to pull this all the time. God told me this, God told me that, and it was all very self-serving on her part. So that had made me very, very sick. So I just kept getting this really sick feeling about this pastor, but I kept telling myself, no, you can't be judgmental about this. This is a man of God. They searched for him. They prayed about this. Well, one Sunday I went to church. He'd been the pastor of this church for maybe 3 or 4 months, and this new person came up to lead the church service, and he was the attorney for the church, and he basically told the whole church that the new pastor had been stealing from the church. Well, luckily, the church got all their money back, and they deleted all evidence of this guy ever being a pastor of the church. And the original pastor, who was a wonderful guy and a humble man, and everything came back as the lead pastor of the church. So trust your gut if it's telling you that a person might be a narcissist. And unfortunately, the other lesson, that I learned is that, people in the church can shame you. This other pastor lady, I mean, she wasn't meaning to harm me. I do not hold her in any judgment over her saying that to me, that, how did you not know that, your husband, wasn't a Christian? How did you not see that? Because then they got fooled too, because narcissists are wolves in sheep's clothing. They're very good at it, and they can fool anyone. So my ex fooled me, and then this very, very good wolf in sheep's clothing pastor fooled this mega church. So anyway, they had a happy ending. They got all their money back, and the rightful good pastor was restored to this church. So thank you for